Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
We want to welcome you to this week's Tech and Tell. Our topic today is Engage Readers with Clusive, Part 2. I'm Anne-Marie Molinari Sanders, and I'm with Train PD at TCAL. Our presenter today is Wendy Velez Torres, and I'll share with you a little bit more about Wendy in a few minutes, but I do want to just go over a few slides with you really quickly. This is new. So if you have technical difficulties during this webinar, we want you to call the Distance Education Call Center, 833-498-2255, or you can go to the website, texasdistanceedhelp.com. That's your new technical center if you have difficulty. And this is just a reminder that we do have this amazing center. The Distance Education Call Center is available to you or your students for free tech support. And you can call 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and there's call center agents available. And they're available not to help do homework for your students, but to help if they're having difficulty accessing their distance learning curriculum or just general technical things. So that number is there for you to utilize. I'm very excited to welcome back Miss Wendy Velez Torres. Wendy is the Senior Instructional Digital Accessibility Specialist at Coppin State University. She is also pursuing an educational doctorate degree in education with a concentration in leadership at Frostburg University. Ms. Torres is a seasoned educator with 23 years of teaching experience, and she is a United States Marine Corps veteran. Thank you for your service, Wendy. Her dedication to digital accessibility ensures that all students can benefit from an inclusive educational practices. So welcome, Wendy, to today's Tech and Tell.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. If you joined us last time, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. And so for this presentation, I'm going to be sharing some things about Clusive. This is part 2 of the session. So last time we talked about what Clusive is. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about what we can do with it, how we can utilize it with our students, and kind of best practices and how that looks. And if you're new to Clusive, this will be a treat. We'll go over how to go into Clusive, what that means, and we'll explore and learn together. We're going to have the deep dive. We're going to talk about how we can use it and our best practices. But before we begin, I want to share this quote with you because I think it really is a great quote about why accessibility matters, why it's important. And I went to this conference and the speaker, he said, when you're designing content, who are you okay with excluding? And that was a really jarring quote when he said that. He said it on purpose because he wanted people to think about accessibility. Naturally, as educators, we don't want to exclude anybody in our course. We don't want to exclude any students. We want all our students to feel like they belong and that they belong in this space and that they are our students. So, of course, naturally, all of us want to say no to this question. Like, we wouldn't be comfortable excluding anyone. Well, the thing is, when you share content that's inaccessible, you are indirectly sending a message of exclusion, whether you intend it or not. So in the last session, I shared about when I started teaching in special education, I had a student named Antonio who had muscular dystrophy. And I have found this great education tool that I thought was awesome. And it was on the computer. And I shared it with my students, and all of them loved it except him because he couldn't fully engage with it. because he needed to use a joystick to navigate around, the joystick from his wheelchair. And he wasn't able to navigate around on a standard mouse. So at that time, of course, I didn't know that that was even a thing. And I kind of trucked along, but I, at that moment, had excluded him and I didn't intend to. That certainly was not the intention, but he did not feel like he was part of the group because he could not fully enjoy or participate. And so on the screen, there's two pictures. There's pictures of my children. So when they were younger, my daughter was about 8, my son was about 1 or 2. And then there's a picture of my son when he's older and my daughter graduating from high school. So if I come off as very passionate about accessibility, it's because it is very personal for me. I am the daughter of 2 disabled parents. So both of my parents were disabled. So I saw what they went through. But my son is also disabled. He's autistic. Seeing it from his perspective in terms of how people have treated him just because of their perception of what they think he's able to do or what they believe they understand about his disability has changed my perspective. Is because now I'm always thinking about that quote. I'm always thinking about, who am I excluding? Am I excluding Xavier when I share these tools? Am I excluding another student? Would I be excluding another student like Antonio? So if I come off as very passionate, that is because it is a very personal experience for me. For those of you who are new, let me just give you a really quick recap of what Clusive is. So Clusive is a free ed tech tool that was designed by CAST. It was built under the Universal Design for Learning principles, where students need different ways to engage with content. It is a free tool that you can use, and so can your students. And it helps students with reading disabilities, so students who may be dyslexic, who want to use it, or just a student who has a whole bunch of information and wants to kind of digest the information in a better way. So you don't have to be disabled to use it. It benefits everyone. Just like ramps were designed for a specific group of people, we all benefit from having a ramp, especially if we are moms and carrying something on the sidewalk. Clusive is free. If you made an account on Clusive last time, you would go to Clusive and you just log in. If you're brand new to it, you want to actually create a free account. You would select the option where it says create a free account. It will ask you to create an email that you want. You can use your Gmail account if you'd like, and you would create a password. After you do that, it's going to send you a link to your email saying to verify. They want to make sure that this email is actually a legit email that an actual human being is actually using, not one that's just being created and it's never going to be used. So it's going to send you a verification email. And then once you get in that verification email, you will have the account. So this is the account page, Clusive. And if you have an account, you would just log in with whatever username and password you created, or if you sign in with your Google account, you would use that way. If you're brand new and have never used it, you would select create a free account. It's going to ask you what your role is. Are you a parent, teacher, or learner? Some of us might be all three. But what is like your primary role in this? Say I'm a teacher. And then it's going to ask you things like, what is your display name? So how do you want your name to be shown on Clusive? So typically that's your username. I usually tell people make that the same name as your username for ease of access. So in my case, my username for my students would be Hood Marine because I went to Hood College and I'm a Marine. You select whatever password you'd like, something that's going to be easy for you to remember. And you do want to put in that email, whatever email that you're going to use. And it does have to be an email that is an active email account. It will then ask you what levels that you teach. You can select whichever ones. If you don't see college in there, you can just say high school. They're just trying to get to know you, but you can still have selection of everything. And you do have to accept the terms. Once you do that, you click on continue, and then it will send you that verification link to your email. And you simply click on that verification link and it will get you into Clusive. Now, when you first make an account, it will try to give you a tutorial of it. You can skip that tutorial if you'd like. If you just made an account, you probably don't have anything on your dashboard. If you joined us last time, you might have something in there, but I'm going to walk you through it. When we get to Clusive, the very first thing we see is this dashboard. And like I said, if you have not created anything on there, you're not going to have anything under here. So in this case, I have something called Demo Doc because that's something that I uploaded to Clusive. So that's my uploaded document. When you first get an account, you probably don't have anything in there. It'll probably say upload a new reading, but there's nothing here. So you'll see the dashboard first. After the dashboard, you'll see the library. So the library has all kinds of different ways you can go. So right now it wants to default to my uploaded readings, so things that I have put into Clusive. So they do have a public reading library where they have multiple books available. And typically this is the very first thing that's available when you first make an account. So these are readings that people have made available for you to use and utilize if you choose to do so. There is a resources tab that gives you a bunch of tutorials and things that you can utilize as an instructor. There's a manage option at the top. This is where you would make a class or add students, which we'll go over in a second. And there is a word bank option where you can select words from a specific reading, which I'll get into as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into this book, which is something that I uploaded. I put this reading in this. And this is the dashboard that a student would see. They would see the text that you have in here. On the left, there is a little thing, looks like a bunch of squares. When I click on it, it gives me my table of contents, so I can go to specific pages if I want to. There is a little person on here that looks like it walks around. Now, what that is the switch option. So the idea behind this is, as students engage with this, it's going to start learning the student's preferences. And then as the student engages with it, it's going to eventually light up and give them different options. So do they want to stay on the current article, or do they want to go down a level or anything else? So it's trying to level it based on their understanding and what they need. So maybe they didn't get enough sleep the night before and they really don't want to concentrate. So it might make it a little easier for them to understand. And it learns that as they interact. Right now, it's not available on this document, just simply because I haven't started interacting with the document. There is some carrots to let them go to the next page of the particular document. They could use that to navigate around, or they can use the table of contents if they choose to do so. There is a little thought bubble here where they can decide how they are feeling at the time. And they can also answer questions in here. So some of these questions I've actually put in here, so you can actually add your own questions. For this, what makes this great is that the students can put the answers to their questions. They can put how they're feeling. And you, as the instructor, would be able to see every single response that your students make. The great thing about this is their classmates do not see their responses. They will see how the reading made them feel, because that's anonymous. But when you click on the results, you will actually be able to see everything that your students answered. So in this case, these are 2 questions that I put in here, and I can add customized questions, which I'll share in a second. And I can get feedback from that, but the students can see that. And then over here on the right, this is where they have that customization tools. This little octagon, when they click on that, this is where the student can interact with this interface in a way that works best for their learning preference. If the student prefers the text to be bigger, or if they want the line spacing to be better, and that's very critical for someone who is dyslexic, it helps them break up where the information is. They can do that. They can decide how the letters are spaced. And again, for some people who have reading disabilities, this is extremely prevalent. They can decide what font they want. They can decide the color. So I tend to like it in dark mode. There's another option that says reading tools, where they can then decide how they want this content read out loud to them. It will read out loud the content. I can decide the voice. I can decide how fast I want it to go. And I can even decide if I want to be translated into my language. Now, by default, it wants to read it in English. So if you want it to be read in a different language, they do have to do an add-on depending on their computer. So that information is actually available in the resources area, where they explain if you have a Windows device, this is what you have to enable. But the translations will also work for any text that they highlight. So in this case, if I wanted this to be read out loud, I can select this little icon that shows up, looks like a little play button.
Student access and accessibility. Myth, the disabled population.
So it will highlight it as it reads it. and it will read it out loud. So it will read all the content out loud to the student, and they can engage with it that way. Now, let's say a student is going through this, and maybe there's something they don't understand, or there's a word, or maybe there's a note that they want to give themselves. They want to learn something else, or they had a question or something. So let's say I didn't know what this word accessibility meant. I can click and highlight it. And when I do that, I get these icons that show up above that word or words, depending on what I highlight. I can highlight more than one word if I want to. I can select this option here. So the student could then write a note to themselves. And what makes this nice is that that note is private for them. So this might be information that they're writing to themselves. This book option right here, this will tell you what that word means. So if they don't know what that word means, they can look it up and they can be like, oh, I've heard this word, or I haven't heard of it. And they can add it to their word bank. If they add it to their word bank, it will help with that leveling the text as they go through it. So then another thing I can do, if I highlight this, I can also read the word if I want to. It will read the word out loud for me. But there's another option where these got these two little arrows on here. If they click on that, it will try to translate that. So in this case, I told it to translate it from Spanish. It's telling me the word here. And in this case, it's going to try to read it in English because I have to put the add-on depending on what my computer is, but it will show me that. I can click on this option where it says simplify the text. So it's going to try to make it a little bit more easier to understand depending on what the words are. And then there's an option called show pictures. So if it has a picture associated with it, it will try to give them a graphic to try to make them understand what that is talking about. They can do that with whole parts of the text or individual words as they go along. So if there is a picture associated with it, they will try to add that. So in this case, it says accessibility. So it's showing that accessibility icon in there to try to make the person understand what is going on there. Those are the features, and that's how a student would go in and get all this information in here. That's great for a personalized experience for the students. But remember, I said you could add students to this and that you can also customize this. Let me share what that means. So in this case, I am in as an instructor. I can see what my students' reactions are in here. Because I have assigned this to a class, I can see a graphic telling me what the students have learned, and I can see my custom question. I could click on that if I wanted to. I'm just showing you what it looks like, and I'll show you how to do it. So in this case, one of the students that I put in there, which was just the student named test student, said, how many people don't disclose, was something that they learned. I put this in thinking like a student, because students always ask this question, why do I need to know this? Why is this important? If I just wanted to get like a glance, I can see that. But if I wanted to do a deep dive and see what my students are actually saying, so did they answer the questions? How do they feel during it? What notes did they take? I can actually go in and see that information. So once you assign these to a student, you will get that information on your dashboard. And so in this case, this is just the one class I have. It's telling me how long I was in. And if I wanted to see what the student did, I want to get more feedback on this particular student, I can click on that student and I can see how long they were in. In this case, I was only in for a few minutes because it was me. I could see when they logged in. I could see what words they looked up. I could see how they said that they were feeling. And then I can also see any comments that they have made on here. They felt bored or they felt disappointed. So in this case, this particular student felt bored reading this. What does that mean? This was their questions. Why is this important? Why do I need to know this? The beautiful thing about this is once you assign this to a student, you get all this rich feedback. Their classmates won't see this feedback. They only will see the reactions because the reactions are anonymous, but they won't see what their individual classmates wrote. But you can, so you can go in and have a discussion with that student. I can talk to the student and say, hey, you only went in for 1 second, so maybe you don't understand why we're reading it because you really didn't engage with the material. Or if it's a universal question that many students are having, maybe a lot of students were tripped up about something, maybe it's something that I can use as a point of discussion. That's what the information would look like after I've assigned it. So how do I do that? How do I add students? How do I create a class? How does that work? So on your dashboard on the top, you would actually go to where it says manage. And when you get to manage, it's going to ask you to create a class. I created a class called test class, and I added a student. I actually want to create another class. Maybe I want to create a new class. You can add as many classes as you want. So if you teach multiple sections, you can have multiple sections. Let's say I wanted to add a new class. I can click on add new class, and it's going to simply ask me to create it manually where I am naming the class, or it's going to ask me to import it from my Google Classroom. So if you use Google Classroom, you can import your Google Classroom into this, which will then import all your students and your roster. With Google Classroom, if you are choosing to do it that way, you would have to click on import, and it will ask you for that classroom account name. It will ask you to allow permissions. So you do have to say, yes, allow CAS to give you permissions to this Google Classroom, which will allow them to import your roster and everything that you have if you do use Google Classroom. And then those students would then be added to the course. So I don't use Google Classroom at my university. We use Blackboard Ultra. I'm just giving you the instructions as to how you can do that with a Google Classroom. So if you do import your Google Classroom, it will import the entire roster that you have for that classroom. So in this case, I'm going to go in like I'm going manually, like I'm just adding the class. I can click on create manually. I can name the class. So maybe this is English 101. And once I do that, I can click on next. And then this is where it's going to ask me to add my student. Now, if I imported my Google Classroom, my roster will already be on there. If I am making my classroom manually, I have to add the student. So I would click on add student. It's going to ask me for their username. What display name do I want to give them? So is that their actual real name? Is that their username? And then you can make a password for them if you choose to do so. Typically, when I set this up for students, I give them all the same password. And then if they're older students, I let them change their password to whatever they want it to be. If they're younger students, I give them all the same password for simplicity's sake. You do not have to put in the email address. And the reason that's important is if a student is less than 13 years old, legally, they're not supposed to have an email account per Google and emails policies. Do they have them? Of course, but legally they're not supposed to have an account if they're under 13. So they don't have to have an email to access this. They just need the username and the password. So you don't have to know your students' emails accounts at all. You just need the username and password. That is how you would add a student to this. Now, let's say I've added my students, I've created them. And let's say I actually want to upload a reading. So in this case, I made a brand new class. And when I make a brand new class, you will see that your dashboard now is empty. There's not a reading in there. This is a brand new class. I can change my dashboard. So if I go back to the test class, I will see that reading that I put in here. But because I just made this class, it's not going to have any readings on here. So I want to assign a reading for my students. I want them to be able to go into Clusive and read a book or something that I've shared with them. And I want them to be able to read it and utilize those reading and accessibility tools. First, you want to either upload or you want to grab a pre-existing reading. You can do it both ways. Right now, I'm going to do upload. So if I upload a new reading, so that's something that I'm creating, that I'm giving to my students, I can select to upload the file. We'll click on the option for browse, and it would open up my computer. And there's 3 kinds of files that you can upload. There's EPUB, which is electronic publication. So for like Kindles and any textbooks, things like that. Word documents and PDFs. Now, I will say with PDFs, as a caveat here, if you use a PDF, a lot of the accessibility features like the read aloud and looking up the content and making notes, that interactivity really gets lost with a PDF, typically because a lot of PDFs are not created correctly. And so they show up as a picture. So a lot of that interactivity will not show up if you use a PDF. I would encourage you to use a Word document or an EPUB. But in this case, I'm just going to click on Browse, and I'm going to go find a Word document that I can share. So let me go. I'm going to add a document. It's just a Word document. And I'm going to click on Upload File. When I do that, it's going to give me the information. It's going to ask me who the author is. Now, if I'm getting an EPUB, it's going to bring that information already in there. In this case, I would just put my name. The sort name is the same name. I could put a description if I choose to do so. If you're doing an EPUB, it's going to grab that description of the EPUB automatically. I could choose to put a cover image so the students know, hey, go to this image if they're highly visual students and need that information. And I can decide what this information is about, and I can decide what reading level this is for. Once I do that, I just say add the uploaded reading, and then it shows up in my dashboard. And now I can do something with this. Now I want to actually assign this reading to my students. It's in my library, but my students don't have access to it yet. These three dots right here, if I click on these three dots, I'm going to have some options. I'm going to have an option that says edit, delete, assign, and customize. Let's go to the assign first. So the assign is saying that I want this particular reading that I selected to be assigned to a particular class. I will click on assign. It will ask me what class I want to assign it to. I can assign it to all my classes or a particular class. In this case, I want to assign it to that new class that I've created. And I click on assign. And so what that now means is that any student listed under English 101 that I've added for that particular class would then be able to access this reading and would then be able to interact with the reading. Now, what if I want to customize? I want to change some questions, or I want to put some feedback questions that I actually want them to answer as they're reading the text to see if they're getting the understanding or if they're getting information. You would do that in the same area on your dashboard. So if I go into my dashboard, I'm going to see my book now here. I see that it's assigned to English 101. Again, those three dots, click on that option that says customize. And when I go to customize, it's going to give me some options. It's going to say, okay, what customization do you want? I could title it. And by default, they just call it customization 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They just give numbers to it. You could make it more personalized if you want, but by default, it just calls it customization 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever you're calling it. I can decide who gets this customization. Maybe all three classes have the same content, but they're different questions I want them to answer. I can select, okay, I want only English 101 to have these specific questions because maybe I want the test class to have different questions. It's going to then ask me first, do I want to highlight any specific vocabulary words that I think might be difficult for the students to put in that word bank for that customization, for that leveling? So do I want to put the words in, or do I want the system to kind of look at my document and see if it can pick out some words that may be useful? In this case, I'm going to say, see some word suggestions. And it's going to give me some word suggestions based on what's in this document. I can say, yes, I think some of these words might be hard for my student. And so I can select which words I think I want in that word bank for that customization so they can level it. I can use their suggestions, or I can add my own if I choose to do so. And then I have this option for questions. So when I showed you the results for my student, there were some questions that showed up on the side for the student. These are some questions that I can provide for the student. So I can type on a question myself in there, or I can use these question starters like what happened when, and then I can add this. So these are their question starters. In these case, these two right here are two that I added in here. I typed those in. I said, what evidence is there of the importance of digital accessibility? That's the question I want the students to actually answer. And I can add whatever questions I want for this. So let me just put this one in. And then I can put save. And then that customization, that question now is shown to everybody in that class. Everybody in the class has to answer the question. And I'm able then to see individually all the students' results with what they've shared. So I can make it very personalized. So I can see what their understanding is and kind of use the data to try to gear it. Perhaps I want more questions. I can add another customization to this if I want to. There's a button that says add another customization. So maybe I want more than one question. Maybe there's multiple questions I want. I can just click on add customization again. I can decide, yes, I want it to be for this particular class. I don't necessarily have to do a vocabulary word again if I've already selected the vocabulary words that I think might be difficult for my students, but I can choose to do so if I want to. But I can also come down here and add another question. So maybe I want them to have another question in here. What did you learn? Or what questions do you have? So I can add as many questions or customizations as I want. There's no limit to the number of questions that I can give my students. But the beautiful thing about this is once I add the questions, all the students are going to get that on their document that's been assigned. And then you can see the answers to those questions, and you can use that data to guide your students. Like, okay, I see that a lot of you really didn't understand this question that I asked. I'm looking at your answers and they're not matching with the reading. Let's discuss. Or the answers you put in here really don't make sense with what you're saying, because you know students are going to wonder if you're actually checking this. I always have that one student who wonders if I actually check this, and they'll actually give me some random answer that has nothing to do with what I'm asking, just to see if I'm paying attention. And I will actually call the student out and then be like, well, I see you answered this, but that has nothing to do with the actual question. And the students are like, oh, you were actually paying attention. So for example, if this was the student document that the students would see, they would go into the actual article and their questions are going to show up here. So as they go through it, they're going to have questions that they can actually answer on here. Now, I'm not logged in as that student, which is why I'm only seeing the generic questions, because this is me as the instructor. But the students would actually see those questions on there, and you would then be able to see their responses to those questions. So if I wanted to see how they actually answered the question, I would have this dashboard, which would show me a real quick bar graph as to what my students did. I see that they learned a little. But if I wanted to know specifically what those students answered, did they answer my question and how long did they spend, it would actually give me information down here. So in this case, I only had one student in the class. This is my test class. I see they only spent about 1 second on it. So if I wanted to see what that student did, I can click on this and I can see that their reactions was that they were bored, they were feeling okay. They looked up these words, they were highlighting those words on their document. These are their answers to their questions. They said they learned a little, and the question that they were asking was, why is this important? Why do I have to know it? Because the question was, what are you wondering right now? And in this case, this was just me putting some questions in there and answering it. So the students would then have that. Since you make the students under manage, I usually make a test student in all the classes. Then I have that username and password, so I can go in and see how it looks from the student perspective. If I did that, let me go in. So in this case, this was a student account that I had where I used Hood Marine. This was the document. And I would see the document and I would see the questions. So see where it says, why do you feel this way? What do you think about this? How are you feeling? Are you feeling frustrated? Why do you feel frustrated? Why am I feeling confused? So that I can answer that, and then it'll save it, and then it'll go to the next question based on what I'm typing on here. So I can always go in and see it as a student as well if I wanted to see how they're interacting with it. I always recommend making a test student account so you can go in and see how that student is seeing it if you have any questions about that. This was a reading that I uploaded, but what if I wanted to use a reading that I found somewhere else? Maybe it's a book or something that I want the students to use this tool for. I'm not limited to just things I create. I can always go to the library and I can always go to all the readings. So these are readings that are publicly shared in here that I can use. And I can then look on the filters where it says show filters, and I can say, I want nonfiction, I want an early reader, advanced reader, I want this many words, and I can see what's readily available in this library. But remember, you can also do EPUBs with this.
Can we kind of go back from the beginning of the dashboard? How do you upload if you go to the library? So Here she's going to go to the library and kind of go through the steps again that you just did.
I uploaded this, but what if I want to use those images from the library? Maybe I want one of those readings and I want to assign it to my students as well. So in this case, these are documents other people have shared or other readings available that I think maybe my students want to use. When you go to library, it's going to give you different options. It could be last pass you're in or the public readings or all readings. So in this case, I just selected all readings. So I'm saying anything that Inclusive may have, but maybe I want the public readings. And when I do that, it's going to filter that out. And then there's this option where I can show the filters and I can select what I'm looking for. Or maybe it's a nonfiction book, or I can say the level I want it to be and how many words I want to be in this particular reading. And then it'll sift through that and give me what's in there. I can also type keywords in here. So if there's a particular person I'm looking for or a particular item, I can type that into that library. And then those options will show up here. Maybe I want my students to read this on John Adams. Maybe we're studying him and I actually want this document to be shared with my students. It's not a document I created, but it's something that I want my students to engage with. And I want to customize this stuff so that I can use it for my students. I want to maybe change the questions, or I want specific questions in this, but I like the content. Let's say I want this one. Every one of the readings come with those 3 little dots in the corner. So I can click on that and I can say, I want to assign this. First, I want to assign it to a class. I want to grab this resource right now. I can assign it to all of my classes or a specific class. So I'll do the English 101 and I'll say save. Now that it's in that class, if I want to, I can go to my dashboard and go to my class. It'll be here. And right now I've got this in here just as it is, but maybe I want to customize this. Maybe I want to add specific questions for this. I can now add those specific questions here on that customize. So I can add my own questions. I want to be able to change these questions up. I want to add more information. They're all going to get the how are you feeling reading this and why do you feel this way. I want specific questions about John Adams and what this text is saying, some information I want them to get. I can now customize that, and everybody in that group will have access to that information. Let's say you go to the library and maybe they don't have something you want. But remember I told you you could put EPUBs in this? Well, you can grab any EPUB and download it and put it on here as well and utilize that. There are some free resources, because we're all educators and we like free, where I can grab some standard books and add to it. This is a repository where I can get ebooks for free and I can get those EPUBs and I can download those EPUBs. And I want to get an ebook that I want to use. So I'm just looking and seeing, and I could certainly filter this out and say, I want specific words, or I'm looking for a specific genre or something. In this case, for the demo, I just want to grab a book. So I see that there's a book here. I can click on it, and then it's going to give me all these different options as to how I can add this book. So it's going to tell me how many words are in this, how hard is it fantasy? But I can come in here and I can download it. Now in this particular one, it gives me a whole bunch of different EPUB files for specific readers. The very first one that this site gives me is the most commonly used EPUB file. So regardless of what tablet or what reader they have, it'll work on all of those. I usually recommend using that one. This one goes a little bit more in depth, like if it has a Kindle, you can use this. These sites will actually allow me to download that EPUB. And now it's on my computer. And let's say I want to give that to my students. I want that interactive book. I can click on upload a new reading. I can say browse, and I'm going to find that EPUB that I just selected. I can say upload file, just like I would with a Word document. And now, because it's an EPUB, it already provides all the information as to who the people are and all that good stuff. I can decide what level I want. I can decide what I want it for, but it kind of already does that for me because it's pulling that information. This reading now shows up on my dashboard, and I can then assign it to whatever class I want, and I can add questions. And they have this beautifully rich e-textbook in here that they can go in and they can learn and read information about it. I can go in here in this table of contents and read about it and get all the information that comes with it. You can do that. There's multiple free ones that are available. I'm sharing with you 4 different ones that you can use. So that was one where I can get a bunch of books. This is another one, which is called Monarch Reader. This one's actually for younger students, for the little guys. So I can decide what kind of books I want in here, and I can decide if I want it to be for everybody or if I want it to be mature, so more mature content for older students, 13 and up. And I can decide the ratings, I can decide what language and different topics. And again, these are free books that if I wanted to grab it, I can just download it right here on this download button. And it'll download as an EPUB, and I can then upload that to Clusive, and I can use that. There's another one. This is called Feed Books, where it's got a whole bunch of free books. And so some of the books are free, some of them are actual books you have to pay for. It just depends on the book. But I can also download those as well and put them in. So I can have full books on this if I want to. If your school uses Bookshare, which is a free tool used for the government, where anybody who has a kind of language processing disability or a visual impairment can have access to Bookshare for free. And they basically borrow books just like they would from a library that are electronic, and that's how they get it. But you can also upload those to this too if you use Bookshare. And then there's the other one, which is the Gutenberg Project, which is a lot of older books that are now in the common domain and the public domain that you can use. And you're not limited to these. If you have any site that allows you to get an EPUB, you would be able to upload those books on there. I encourage you to play around with Clusive and see how you like it.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.